What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso. A little late Thursday night, Discord, wait for the GM mailbag. I am sure there'll be emergency pods over the weekend. I know we're going to have our Discord show drop over the weekend. I know we're going to have Buck the Trend. I know we're going to have TOJ Talks. I know we're going to have Sunday AM Coffee. But it just felt weird not having a podcast hit today after having 3 hit Tuesday, 3 hit Wednesday. Just got to get something up. A lot of questions piling up, so I wanted to answer them while we wait for, is it Darren Mougey? I got to figure out what I'm going to call him versus just calling him his full name all the time. It's better than Lance Newmark and just calling him Lance. I don't think Lance is in the mix at this stage. I find it hard to believe that if they're going to hire him, they wouldn't bring in Mougey and Trey Brown for second interviews, and I feel like it will be between those two, but the wind seems to be blowing in the Mougey's direction, which I don't know if that nickname's going to stick. We will obviously talk about him a lot more in depth if and when he ends up being the hire. Mougey's from Denver, Trey Brown coming from Cincinnati. Somewhat similar backgrounds, although I feel like most Jet fans, understandably, are a little more excited and intrigued about Mougey's. And that 6'7" fellow is seemingly the front runner at the moment, but this has been a weird search. So nothing would surprise me at this point, outside, honestly, of them going back to Lance Newmark, which means the Newmark files, part 1 and part 2, may just live in the archives and infamy forever. But excited to talk GM and excited to talk staff hires all weekend. A lot of exciting names being thrown around, potentially for Aaron Glenn's staff. I don't like to overreact at this phase because it's the phase where a lot of names get leaked and contracts get negotiated and you get too far down a rabbit hole with certain guys. But I will say generally, I like that he is mindful of trying to bring some veterans in who have experience as a head coach, who have experience around the organization. Steve Wilkes is a potential defensive coordinator, perfect guy to hire. So he can Glenn could just be the head coach. You got a guy you could fully trust with the defense. Todd Haley coming around as maybe an offensive assistant or consultant, a guy who is kind of the asshole the Jets need in certain parts of the organization and has worked here before and obviously has head coach experience. Mike Westhoff just being a consultant, another voice around the building. A lot of different names being thrown around at offensive coordinator. I do think they might be taking from the Rams, but I don't want to get out over my skis. Let's see. Would love if they could get Rizzi as their special teams coordinator, but that might be a bit pie in the sky at the moment. But it won't be Brant Boyer, who's already interviewing with the 49ers. Good luck, Brant. Take Irv Charles with you if you'd like. Take Zerline with you if you'd like. Take Gibson with you if you'd like. And let's start fresh on special teams here. Anyway, to the questions in the Discord, which has been a true electric house lately. Keep it coming, please. It's been great. All right, from that QC guy, with Glenn's defensive scheme being more man blitz heavy, what's the plan for the Jets at CB2? With Reed leaving this year, are we going to try Eccles as a full-timer? I am perfectly fine with them rolling with Eccles as a full-timer. I think you got to be thoughtful about where you spend your money. I think everyone's assuming that because Glenn was a cornerback, they're going to draft a cornerback definitely in the first round or go break the bank at corner. Maybe. I just wouldn't automatically assume that. So let's see how it plays out. I have no issue with them, considering sticking with Eccles. I don't know if Stiggers is ready yet, but Eccles has starting experience, and you're going to have Sauce. You're going to have Michael Carter. My only note on this is, again, don't just assume the Jets are drafting corner at 7 because Aaron Glenn was a corner. I think they'll be looking at all positions, particularly the trenches, and certainly would not write off a guy like Mason Graham if he's on the board at 7 overall. Yes, I would poke around some names in free agency who have some familiarity with Glenn's scheme, but are they going to break the bank at corner when they already have Sauce and Michael Carter and they have needs at other positions? So would not be shocked if Eccles was a starter. Next one from Brit Chet. Don't know if it's just me, but I really don't like the whole coming home and welcome home vibe and language. It's kind of dumb. Home implies comfort and warmth and protection and safety. We don't want any of that, right? Don't we want someone to come in and be the opposite, hard-nosed, tough, taking no prisoners, and ensure there is no safety to turn this place upside down because it's way too comfortable and not nearly enough like a top-performing place of work and effort with an application of responsibility. Very disappointed in the early PR nonsense. Anyone else? I think you're overthinking it a little bit. I don't find myself mad about it. Of course, they're going to play up the nostalgia angle. This guy was a very popular, well-liked player for the team who punched above his weight because of his size, was one of their most exciting players in a key part of their turnaround from being the worst team in the league to almost making the Super Bowl. So it's more of a turn of phrase. It's not playing up that the current Jets are like this perfect, warm, comfortable home that's great for everybody. It's more playing up that this guy is coming back to where he made himself known in the NFL. There's some nice nostalgia for certain aged Jet fans with that. So I get it from a PR perspective, and I don't have a problem with it. I get the like, whoa, like our building needs to be turned upside down. I couldn't agree with that more. And I think Glenn will bring some of that energy and we'll have the carte blanche to do some of that energy. I hope. I don't want to get over my skis. But, the early PR campaign of embracing the fact that this dude was a really popular player here and wanted to come back here because this organization meant a lot to him and means a lot to him, it makes a lot of sense from someone who works in media. And I think bluntly it's working with most fans. And there's nothing wrong with fans being excited about a guy who loves the Jets and made a lot of exciting plays for the Jets in their old stadium in front of their fans. So let's see how it plays out. Winning decides all of this, right? And his energy and what changes he makes and doesn't make will decide all of this. Next one from Drubin84. Anyone know if the Aaron Glenn press conference is today? Thought I heard it somewhere. It's not today. I'm recording this Thursday night. I think it's going to be Monday. Maybe they'll have I would assume they'll have the GM hired by then and they'll do it together. But Monday is what we're expecting at this point. Little Monday Florham Park presser. Next one from Jet Flight. What do you think about trading back from 7 this year, recouping a first for next year, running it back with Rodgers and trying to compete this year? If it works out, we pick in the mid-20s. We can potentially trade up for a quarterback using those 2 first-rounders next year. I think at this stage, you're looking at all options, right? Like, it's not a crazy thought. I still think Rodgers is more likely than not to not be here next year. But even independent of that, if there's a trade back that makes sense and you could stack up some draft capital, you consider it. I will say this is not a deep draft. When it comes to blue chippers, it cuts off, I think, pretty quickly at 8 or 9. That will be a recurring thing you hear from Connor and Meeks and Dalvin and Dan and everyone talking about the draft, working on the draft guide. So you're probably giving up a certain level of talent if you trade back. But, maybe the 6 players taken in front of you, you're we don't really feel that strongly about anyone. Let's get more capital. And next year we're going to need to be more aggressive. I would not write off the Jets trading back. I probably would write them off trading up unless something really funky happens where they love one of the quarterbacks and they start to fall. But that seems unlikely. I still feel like the chalk is going to be they stay put and take a defensive lineman or offensive lineman, maybe McMillan if DA leaves and they feel really strongly about getting another playmaker. I'll be mocking Mason Graham pretty regularly until someone snaps me out of it. Next question from Uncle Beefy. What a name. You done any work on the defensive tackle? This is for Connor on the draft guide. So I'll tell you the answer for him. He has done plenty of work on defensive tackles. We actually talked a little bit about this in War Room last week, but we'll have a lot more to come with more draft-centric content, not just on round 1, right? Round 2, round 3, round 4. And defensive tackle is a huge need. Even if they address it in round 1, they need more. They need 2 or 3 additions up front because it's Quinnen, Will McDonald, Jermaine coming off an injury, and then it's a mess. No more Kinlaw, no more Sal Thomas, certainly no more Michael Clemens. All 3 of them got to go and all their reps got to be replaced. And, I like Leonard Taylor, but you got to make a couple meaningful additions. So I could see them double dipping at a spot like defensive tackle in the NFL draft. Next question from Dave6999393. Because update that name. Let's make it a little tighter in Discord. Does a new regime attack their first offseason differently than a more established one would? Specifically in the draft, would they typically target more high-floor players since they might have a shorter scouting period as they fill out those staffs and scout on the fly? It's an interesting theory. I think it's one we'll dive into a lot more. I don't necessarily think that's the case. We'll have a better feel when we see what they do in the front office. Not just who's the number 1, who's the number 2? Who's the number 3? What is the pro personnel department? Do they make any meaningful changes in the college scouting department? I expect Aaron Glenn and his staff to be very heavily involved. I expect them to attend the scouting combine. I expect them to be very engaged in the draft process. I actually think in year 1 of a new regime, they're more prone to taking a high variance swing because they have more rope and they have more time if it doesn't work out. This could be for better or worse, but look at the Douglas regime, right? They took the big swing with Becton over Wirfs. Didn't work out, but you feel a little like you'd be a little more bold in year one and put your imprint, I think. And that could be the wrong thing, but you see that, I feel like, where it's like, yeah, it's my first year. Like I'm gonna take a swing for the fences. Now, on the other half of that, like McCagnon did the opposite, right? He took Leonard Williams. That was a very safe pick. And Leonard Williams was good, never great here. So it's going to depend on the personality of the GM and the people he puts around him and how the board breaks. But I wouldn't just assume they're going to do like safe. I think if anything, they're like, hey, we got like at least 4 or 5 years here, so let's be aggressive and swing for the fences. Next one from JP Waxer. What's the expected change in the defensive scheme besides the man coverage and blitzing? Will it likely be heavier front, 4-3-3-4, a heavy middle linebacker in the middle? Look, one thing I think I will like about Glenn is there'll be more variance based on the players. I did definitely play more man. I think you'll definitely see Sauce used in more dynamic ways than he's been used previously. I am curious to see how a guy like Quincy plays in this defense, but let's see. I still think you're going to see a lot of 4-3. I don't think you're going to see this load up to being the Mangini 3-4 anytime soon. We will do a deeper dive on this on things like Buck the Trend, and we're going to do sort of we did this with Saleh. We'll have some X and O scheme heavy episodes to really dig into this, but you'll see more man coverage and a lot more variance and less stubbornness. And look, to Saleh's credit, like his stubbornness like worked for a long time. There were certain situations that would fall apart. But by the end, when it was just Ulbrich, it got very ugly very fast. So they had like that, like the beginning was a disaster. You had a really nice middle years, and then the end was a disaster. I am most interested to see a guy like Quincy. How does he look in this scheme? I think they're going to put more of a premium on safety and like ball hawks and guys who could make plays and not kind of like right off that position like Saleh and Ulbrich did. So I wouldn't be shocked if you saw some meaningful investment there. That's one area I definitely keep an eye on. And I don't know. I just think you'll see a lot more of Sauce traveling and a lot more of Sauce just manned up and a lot more involved week to week. And hopefully he cleans up the penalties a little bit, but I think he's going to thrive in this scheme. And I think guys who could get after the quarterback like McDonald and Jermaine, if you can get after the quarterback, they'll find a way to use you to get after the quarterback, regardless of how heavy or light the front is. I also think there'll be less rotational with the defensive line. You're not going to have the hockey shifts on the defensive line and the stubbornness of we got to play Sal Thomas and Michael Clemens 40 to 60% of the snaps throughout a goddamn season. Yes, I'm still bitter about it. See if there's any more here from Beast RT. Do you think all 3 GM candidates were pre-approved by Glenn? Since they all seem to have some sort of ties, the top candidates seem to be kind of random. I think Glenn is very involved in how this decision is being made. And I'm doing nothing but guessing here because I'm not in the building. But I have a feeling that the presumed pairing of Newmark and Glenn was something that was more agent-driven, trying to get someone paid and trying to force someone to being a bundle deal. I think when it got to the real conversation, there might have been a little more hesitance from Glenn, who was like, yeah, Newmark was like really like Ben Johnson's guy, not my guy. Why are you assuming he's my guy? If there's other people you want to talk to them. And, you know, particularly with the Denver ties and the Sean Payton ties, you wonder if a guy like Mougey got brought up and it's like, why don't we have another conversation with him? We already talked with him once. I know that Trey Brown has a lot of big fans in the Jets building on the business side. So I could see it being like, it seems like Glenn's a little lukewarm on Newmark and doesn't have to have him. So let's go get 2 other guys we're excited about. We all like Trey Brown, and we know he has some shared history or shared references with Mougey, and that we kind of like those 2 guys. So let's bring them in for a combo. And they're not among the people we called already and said we're going to hire a different GM. That or they just listened to Newmark Files Part 1 and 2 and we're like, let's go with somebody else. I'm kidding. I don't think that's what's actually happened. Maybe, but that's probably not what happened. Anyway, last question from Alex Antaki. Any chance a potential GM candidate sees Glenn as a CEO and is now not interested? You think anyone will lose interest if they feel like they're below the coach? Probably not, but curious on your thoughts. I don't. I get the question. It's, it depends on the person and the personality, where they are in their career. I could see a certain ego element of that, but I think for the kind of guys that they're looking at, the guys who are in the final 3 or 4, I think it's going to be ideally more of a partnership, but Glenn was hired first, and I do feel like Glenn's going to be more of a driving voice in the organization. And maybe for a GM, they look at that and say, like, look, like, this guy's going to be a better, more effective buffer between me and ownership and keep them away so I could just do my job. And he's not going to be meddling like he was meddling with Joe Douglas. Like, if you're in that top spot, part of your job is dealing with Woody Johnson and dealing with ownership. And I can see a GM being like, all right, Aaron's going to handle that. And I'm going to have space to just like scout and do contracts and run my personnel department. Other hand is like, look, like, I want to be the top football guy, no questions asked. And the Jets have kind of tried that with Douglas. It didn't work. Like, it wasn't fully that way with McCagnon, but McCagnon had way more juice in the Jets' work than Bowles did at the time. The last time the coach really had more juice than the GM was Rex with Idzik and Rex with Tannenbaum towards the end. And that didn't particularly work. It worked the best when like Rex and Tannenbaum were like a true partnership and truly on the same page in a way that I think Tannenbaum and Mangini were for the most part. So, for the guys that the Jets are likely to hire, the final 2 or 3 candidates, I think they're going to look at it as a positive. Could a guy like a Dimitrov be like, you know what, like, I'm not going to deal with that. If I'm going to come back and be a full-time GM again, maybe less appealing for a guy like, Hallaby, who might want it to be that much more aggressive with how he fully overhauled everything and like would not want anyone else interfering with it. That's just me guessing though. So I will say with confidence though, I think Glenn is like, this will be the Glenn regime, not the Joe Douglas regime, where like it was Douglas's show, which is why it was so much more annoying when he got very mopey at the end and, got on the solid mope train. So thank you everyone for all the questions. We'll be back tomorrow with some version of an emergency pod and we will talk to you soon.